Welcome to another edition of Joy Business Special with me, Novan Akwahefo. Today, we'll be speaking to Mr. Kojo Mata, who is the Managing Director for the ARB Apex Bank. And this particular bank oversees the work of rural and community banks in this country. You must be aware that very soon, the big brother, I call him, or the father of all, that is the Bank of Ghana, will bring its cleanup exercise to their back door. It will definitely do that. But how prepared are they? And what has been going on within the sector over the years? We know that a lot of things are going on, but we want to understand the sector, what they do, what has been the ups and downs over the years, and how they are driving the financial inclusion agenda for this nation. Thank you very much, Mr. Kojo Mata, for joining us on this Joy Business Special. I know that you've been here for, I think, 2 years or a little over 2 years. And I want to first find out from you what your thoughts are as far as the rural and community banking industry is concerned.
Thank you very much, Novan. It's a joy having you here, and good evening to our cherished viewers. The rural banking industry has come a long way. It started in 1976 when the first rural bank was established in Nyakrom, Aguna Nyakrom in the central region. For 42 years and counting, the rural banking industry has been in existence. In 2008, we had 126 rural banks. Currently, we have 144 rural and community banks. We are expecting our new baby, Efiduasi Rural Bank, to be open before the end of the year, and that will bring the number to 145. So I can say without any doubt that the rural banking industry has come to stay. And the sort of services we provide to the rural community, the unbanked, the underserved, we do not think any institution is well positioned to serve that niche apart from the rural and community banks.
What has been your impact? Because yes, you said that you are rendering services that nobody within the financial space, even though we have the microfinance, we have the finance houses, the commercial banks themselves are there, and all other, the credit susu, all these people do exist within the financial space or the banking catchment space that we have. What has been your impact within this number of years from where you sit?
Thank you. The rural banks currently have over 6.5 million customers, 6.5 million customers. Just a little below 10 years, that number was below 3 million. So in the space of 10 years, we've doubled that number from 2.9 million to 6.5 million. In 2008, less than 500,000 people borrowed from the rural banks. As we speak, the number is over 1.3 million. That is at the end of 2018. The number is over 1.3 million. That's the number of people who borrow from the rural and community banks. Having said that, let me say that the total number of rural customers of rural and community banks is more than all the universal banks put together, the number of customers we serve. Though the balance sheet of the rural banks, the total assets of the rural banks form less than 10%, precisely about 5% of the banking industry total assets. We have just a little about 4 billion, which in 2008 was less than 500 million. So you can see the growth that the rural and community banks have made over this period, which averages over 75% per annum.
Interesting.
From less than 500 million to 4 billion, over 4 billion Ghana cedis. And total deposits as at the end of 2018 was 3.3 billion Ghana cedis, which also grew from 344 million in 2008.
Wow.
So the rural banks are making significant contributions to the growth of the rural sector. And that is where our kith and kins are. Even though most of them have branches in the peri-urban areas, our core areas of operation, catchment areas, are the rural folks.
I know that these banks actually belong to the people themselves. That's why they are rural and community banks. And you talk of all this growth in terms of deposits, you mentioned the assets and all that. And in my mind, I'm asking that you were given so much loans, and you talk about the fact that from 300,000, you've gone to over 1 million loans, individuals who have received loans from these banks. Are they able to pay back?
Yes, most of them are able to pay back. The numbers I've given you are as at the end of the period, not loans granted during the period. The rural banks grant loans to salary workers, some for 3 months, or some for 6 months. Some are for over a year. And of course, there are still some customers who will not be able to pay the non-performing loans, which is between 10 to 12% of the, as at 31st December 2018, the NPL ratio for the RCB industry is about 11.5%, 12.5%. So we can only encourage customers who have borrowed from banks, financial institutions for that matter, not only rural and community banks, to pay back their loans. Because when customers walk to the bank to withdraw their deposits, we should be able to pay them, which we have been doing. And if customers default on their loans, they are putting the banks in unpleasant situations where they will not be able to pay their customers. So those who borrow from the banks should pay back, because that is what the banks use to make their returns and also pay interest on depositors' monies.
I see. So what are the plans, I mean, from your side? Because the ARB PES Banks serves as a mini regulator, if I want to put it that way, apart from the big brother Bank of Ghana sitting up there, also overlooking how you are supervising these banks. What are the plans to ensure to even lower that 11%, probably to the bare of 1, 2, 3, 4%? I mean, how are you ensuring that these things are done? Because at the end of the day, it's people's money. And I think that Bank of Ghana over the period I've said, one of their biggest headache has been non-performing loans in this country.
Mm-hmm. Good. It's a question of credit management. And we have revamped our credit and risk management department, and we have been running training programs for the rural and community banks on the credit issues. So we can only provide training and education to the rural and community banks from director level, loan assessments, etc., and to the general managers and the credit officers, which we have been doing vigorously. So from our end, it is one of the functions that we undertake for the rural and community banks, that is training them. And I believe it is one of the surest ways of reducing the non-performing loans.
Well, you mentioned the director level issue, and I think let's now delve into corporate governance. As far as the structure is concerned, the Bank of Ghana has spelled out clearly what they want to see with regards to how we should handle these issues going forward. And I don't know how you are ensuring that that is adhered to at those levels, at the very low levels of these banks. The reason being that we know that, I mean, some are fishermen sitting on boards, and you're wondering what they're able to read and how they're able to regulate these banks the way they have to. How are you ensuring that you get the right people to sit there and they help in steering those mini ships, if I'll call it, into the right direction by cracking the whip, even if you have to?
Good. The central bank has issued the corporate governance directives, a draft to the rural and community banks. We got a copy for our comments. So by the end of July, I believe we'll be able to submit our comments. Actually, our comments are supposed to reach the Bank of Ghana by the end of June, and hopefully during the third quarter, a final version will be issued to guide the corporate governance issues of the rural and community banks. Part of this requires training and certification of the directors. Whether you are a fisherman, and again, don't underrate our fisher folks and our farmers. They have local knowledge that qualifies most of them to sit on these boards. And again, most of them are educated. They are not illiterates. They may not be bankers, they may not be lawyers, but they have a lot to offer the community. And rural and community banks. It is owned by the community, and you need community local knowledge to be able to steer the affairs of the rural and community.
Do I have a feeling that you have a special directives when it comes to the corporate governance issues, apart from what has been issued already by the Bank of Ghana?
Yes.
There's a separate one,
yes,
that will be used in governing rural and community banks in the country?
Yes.
Okay.
The one that was issued for the universal banks, there's a different one specifically for the rural and community banks.
Okay.
So that's what we are working on.
Okay.
Because it's not everything that affected the universal banks that will affect the rural and community banks. So the central bank thought it wise to issue specific directives to the rural and community banks. Of course, a lot of the things are the same, like the tenure of the directors. We have the 9 years, at least for now. That is what is in the directive. The rural bank chapters are bringing their memorandum to eventually, maybe the central bank may vary it. If they don't, let's assume they don't, then it means it will still be 9 years as for the universal banks. If they do, then there will be a different version. The general managers will also be with the banks for a 4-year term, renewable for three terms.
So that's 12 years.
That's 12 years. The same thing for the universal banks. However, we keep arguing that unlike universal banks, where the managing directors are directors and members of their boards, in the case of rural and community banks, the CEOs or the general managers, they are not members of the board. So there should be a different approach in handling the general managers. If the Bank of Ghana listens to this argument, then they may vary it. If they do not, then the general managers will also have to serve the 12-year period as pertains to the universal banks.
And if you talk of varying, is it that you want them to be there forever, or you are increasing or asking that they are put on the board?
At this stage, not that they should be put on the boards or they should be there forever. I don't think being there forever, nobody can be there forever. And if it affects all the rural banks, it may be a good thing The challenge we have now is most of them have been there for, and some of them have very few years left to retire. And the challenge, the transition, what they may do. If somebody is 56 years and has been in the bank for general manager for 18 years, and okay, fine. By the time the directive becomes effective, he may have 2 or so years left. What do you do? You may not be able to find another job, and that is some of the challenges that most of them are talking about. So we'll dialogue with the regulator and see how we can handle borderline cases and the sort. So nobody is suggesting that general managers should be in their banks forever.
I see. Let's move to the area of capital requirement or minimum capital. This is topical everywhere. How's that going for your folks?
Yes, capital is needed for business. And as we speak, over 110 or 115 of the rural banks have met the requirement. The ones that have not been able to, the shareholders are doing everything possible. Some of them are going through merger processes. I know 4 banks in Brong and Ahafo regions have concluded the processes to merge. And I know the banks in Oti are also starting discussions to merge. Some of the bigger rural and community banks are thinking of investing in their sister banks that may be having the capital requirement needs, and to invest in them. We have one story like that, which was done by Fiasiman Rural Bank, and they have invested in Triful Rural Bank, and it is working beautifully. And it's a model that we have sold to the bigger and stronger rural and community banks, because we believe that together and a strong industry, it is good for everybody. It is not the wish of any rural bank to see another sister rural bank being closed down. We all want to exist. And even where rural banks have seemingly some liquidity challenges, their colleagues rally around and support them. Where the ARB Apex Bank may not be in the position to lend to them, but we've been doing that beautifully well so far. But then where there is the need for a sister rural bank to lend to another rural bank, they do that. So the capital requirement, we will be on top of it.
Mr. Kojomata, do you get worried when you're going to bed, knowing very well that one day, very soon, the central bank would bring its cleanup exercise to your backyard, where you're overseeing this over 100 banks and seeing any of them close down? Do you get worried?
I don't get worried.
Why?
I wish the central bank moves in quickly so that we all know what the position is. Why? Because it will put all sorts of rumors to bed that if 2 banks or the licenses of 1 bank is revoked, we will all have known that because that bank has not been operating for, say, a year or 2 or whatever, that is why the license has been revoked. So it will put to bed all sorts of spurious and malicious messages being thrown around. So I don't get worried that the central bank will come and close down rural banks. I told you earlier that the rural banks serve a very, very important sector of the economy, and for that matter, the country. So we do not expect the central bank to just get up one day and say, I'm closing down 20, 30, or whatever rural banks. So I don't have sleepless nights on closure of rural and community banks.
But are all your banks active as of today?
Maybe one or two, for one reason or the other, are not active.
Like they've closed down by themselves?
Yes, I know.
Folded up?
Not really folded up. Occasionally they, not really folded up, but yep, they are not very active.
They're not very active.
Yes.
And what are you
Yes.
doing about that? I mean, would you not want to see what
we
you
have
can do
invited-
to bring them up?
We
Or
have
probably
we have
say-
invited their directors, and we are still discussing with them what they should do to be able to bring the banks up.
So the directors are poised to want to bring the banks
Yes,
up.
yes. Nobody wants to be associated with a failed bank.
But you know very well that very soon if they don't, they will go
if they
down.
if they don't, then it is not for the want of trying. And if it is possible for us to revive them, and we get the central bank support as far as funding is concerned, we will be able to revive them. So we should not be overly worried that rural banks will be closed down. I'm not saying it cannot happen.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying it
I'm
cannot
worried
happen,
here.
but I'm
that-
very positive that we'll be able to salvage the situation.
Why should the central bank be the one to want to come in to help them? I mean, if you didn't run your bank well and it's going down, you must as well say goodbye.
Well, if that's the last resort, why not?
And let me now bring in the issue of panic withdrawals. What is the plan? Because you see, this is what we've seen within the industry. The microfinance is closed down, and people even go to the stand of the ones that have been said to be in good standing to say, what we heard is the microfinance industry is bad, we want to withdraw our money. And so you have to see the firefighting approach being used in trying to calm people down to say, don't worry, your monies are safe, these people are in good standing. What is the ARB Apex Bank's plan with these rural community banks to ensure that when the central banks pulls the plugs, we will not see people rushing even to the good standing ones to want to take their money? Even before we go to what your thoughts are regards to how the Bank of Ghana should approach this.
Good. Panic withdrawal is not a good thing for any bank. And I keep saying that no financial institution will be able to survive panic withdrawal, a run on them for a long time. There was this story of a bank that was experiencing heavy withdrawals during the day. And they started checking what was going wrong. Do you know what happened? A bus had a fault in front of one of their branches. So the passengers alighted and they were milling around the frontage of the bank. And somebody took a picture and circulated it that this bank is having a problem. So people started rushing on other branches. And this has got nothing to do with liquidity. But somebody just sent a message that you see this number of people in front of this bank, they are all coming to withdraw their money. When people rush on you like that, you can't survive it for a long time. So, for the sake of the economy, for the sake of the banking industry, we should be circumspect in the sort of messages we circulate. A few years ago, I think a year or so ago, there was this story from one of our banks in Kachi. They were on deposit mobilization, and they met this woman and convinced her to do business with them. And when the woman went to bring her money out, do you know where the money was? She dug a hole and put the money in it and put firewood on it. And even though the money was in a rubber bag, firewood, the termites just did justice to most part of the money. if we tell people the banking industry is not strong, the alternative may be they will be putting their monies in holes. We can run a good country, the financial sector, when we are keeping monies under our pillows or we are keeping our monies in holes. So we need to, and including the media, encourage everybody that savings and dealing with the financial institutions is the way to go. When you are doing business, you may not be able to have all the money yourself to do the business. You will need to borrow from the banks. You will need to borrow from one institution or the other. So where will the institutions get the monies to lend to the business people? So where there are excesses, you save. Where there is need, you go to the financial institution. And that's why I said, when you borrow from the banks, pay so that the system can continue running. So panic withdrawal should not be encouraged in any form.
But then my question actually is how prepared you
and again,
are
let me tell you,
to absorb those shocks.
When we have been able to manage the situation so far, one of our banks in Western region, within a week, paid over 1 million cedis. And for a rural bank to pay 1 million cedis in a week, they had the liquidity themselves. There were some that we had to support. When this universal bank thing started, one of our banks in Ashanti, they had deposits from 3 million cedis deposit from fixed deposits from about 2 or 3 customers who decided that when the deposits matured, they were not going to renew. And they had other smaller amounts. They went to the bank when those ones matured, and the bank paid them. Another one matured, the bank paid them. They said, no, we thought you will not be able to pay us. So the bigger amount, not that we needed it, but we're just trying to test you. So when people want to withdraw, just to test, don't forget when you make the deposit, the bank is assuming that we'll be in business with you, so they also lend to other customers.
Yes.
So when you get up one day and you say, I want my money, of course, you are entitled to it, to take your money back. But the people the bank lent to, you can't just get up and say, sell all your stock. Because when you give the monies to business people, they've also gone to buy stock, they buy goods that they are selling. So until they sell, they will not be able to pay the banks. So if you get up and you say, I want to withdraw my money, of course, if it is a small amount, it's fine. And if it is for a period and the period, the fixed deposit matures and you don't want to renew, yes, once we have enough notice, we'll be able to manage. So what we are doing is where there is the need, we support the banks to meet the liquidity challenges.
How best do you think the central bank should go about its cleanup of your sector to prevent the kind of shocks we have seen in terms of people being laid off, the fact that if you are within a community, let's take a place like Nandom. Nandom has only the Nandom Rural Bank. And it's a new district now, which means that there is no other commercial bank within that area. I am not saying that they will be affected, but using them as an example, saying that if it happened, that Nandom's license is revoked, it means that that whole economy is shuttered. They may have to go to Laura to do business there. How are you ensuring these things doesn't happen? And what's the best way you think the central bank should deal with this?
Thankfully, I've visited all the banks in Upper West region. There are only 4. Nandom, Sunzale, Laura, and Sisala. I visited all of them. And that's what we keep saying, that they are providing very good services to the communities in which they are. So, and thankfully, Nandom is one of the best rural banks we have in the country. So using them as an example should not send any signal to anybody.
That is why I was very clear to issue that disclaimer.
So they are one of the best banks we have in the country. So, and again, talking about support, as the banks have challenges, they support each other. So Nandom will support Laura, Sunzil may support Sisala, and vice versa. So, how should the central bank do? You just used a very good example. They are the only rural bank or the financial institution regulated in the area. So, if assuming they were having problem, we'll be able to rally around and say you have a brief or temporary liquidity challenge. So we'll come in to help you. You see, the rural bank industry has gone through a lot of renewal. Some of the good banks we have today, in the 90s, I know I've done restructuring exercise for some of them, and they are the best banks we have today. Manya Krobo Rural Bank, Bogoso, which is now Fiasiman, they've all gone through, but they are the best banks we have in the country today. So getting up to close them is not the way to go. They may need just a little intervention, and bingo, they will be back on track. So if it is possible, I will encourage the regulator, the central bank, for the needed push where it is needed, and then we will be able to revive the rural banks that may be having challenges.
So that we don't have to close any of them down. That is one of the wish you have. That they will get up and say, we think that the rural and banking sector, rural and community banking sector is robust, strong, and so we are not closing any of them.
And resilient. And so for that matter, we need to keep them going.
You need to keep them going. But the regulator is also very, very adamant, saying that this time around, you have any challenge, why not? They are not tolerating anybody doing any, would I use the word skirmishes?
Yes, the regulator is entitled to do that. Okay, but don't forget, they are owned by the community. So you can say, oh, so why should, you've already mentioned that why should the regulator put money in it? The services we are rendering, the financial inclusion agenda of government, you need institutions like that. There are some places, they are the only people. When you are paying LEAP, they are there. When government introduced planting for food and jobs, the rural banks were in the center of it. ADB was nominated or chosen to roll out this program, but ADB alone couldn't do it.
They have to fall on the rural and community banks.
fall on the rural and community bank. We are on the ground. The rural and community banks are on the ground. Planting for food and jobs, cocoa purchases, cashew nuts, shea butter. We are in talks with other partners. Exim Bank and UNICEF. We do a lot of partnerships that we do things on the ground that the big boys, it doesn't register on their radar, because it is, when you do the cost benefit, it's a small benefit to them, but for us, that is the people we are serving. As long as they are served well and they are not left out, that is our joy.
Let's look at the digitization agenda. I mean, I'm sure that it's today mobile money platforms being rolled out by almost every bank. Just yesterday, I heard Mr.
Seto
Amedeku, very good, the head of payment systems, talk about the fact that but now to even get into the mobile money operations, if you're a bank or any institution, you must set up a different entity, and then it should be 30% owned. I don't know, you've been here for 3 years. What's the agenda as far as digitizing and ensuring that if I am with, let's say, Fiasiman Bank, as you said, and I get to Nandom, I can still do transaction? Or if I come to Dotebri, down in the Ashanti region, I still can have a transaction done for me that I do. Everything should be seamless. What's the drive? What's the plan?
That's the structure we already have. The rural banking system is networked. There are over 700 agencies or branches that we have talk to each other. So if you go to Nandom and you want to make a deposit to an account at Bonzali or Angron or Fiasima, you will be able to make a deposit, I-deposit that we call it. And if it is somebody else's account, the money gets posted into the person's account instantly, real time. So we are networked. We are the largest network of banks in the country. 700 and over branches. We call them agencies, but they are bank branches. So the banks, Apex Bank runs the data center for the rural and community banks. So all the accounts are domiciled in the head office of ARB Apex Bank. So we run end of day for them and all the processes. So we are in the process of upgrading our core banking software to be able to take advantage of all the digitalization issues. Mobile banking, internet banking, we are rolling those out. Thankfully, we got some funding from the World Bank through the Ministry of Finance, and we are rolling that out before the end of the year, and by Q1 of 2020, our agency banking will be up and running, and where you don't necessarily need to even go to a rural bank branch to be able to do banking or receive banking services. You can make a deposit or a withdrawal or credit requirement or request at an agent, which may be a shop, which may be a filling station, which may be a pharmacy shop. So this is what Apex and the rural banks are doing. And we want to be part of government's financial inclusion agenda. So we want government to succeed. And the way to go is digitalization. And we are not being left out. Now, on mobile money, yes, we are part of it. We may not set up a subsidiary. I think those banks that they want to come up with their own mobile money, when we do the cost-benefit analysis and we think it is good, yes, we will not be left out. But for now, this year and maybe 2020, our focus is to look at upgrade of our core banking software and add other modules to it that will make service to the rural banks top-notch. You know, the central bank has been talking about cyber security.
I was going to come there and ask you, when it comes to cyber security issues, I mean, how are you handling that? I mean, to ensure that your banks remains protected. I mean, we hear of banks losing money almost every day, as far as that area is concerned.
It's a huge area, and as part of our upgrade, we are also going to install the necessary softwares and protective devices to be able to make sure that the rural banking industry is secure. So, and Apex Bank is doing that on behalf of the rural banks. It's not each rural bank that will be doing it. Apex Bank will be doing it on behalf of the rural and community banks, especially those that are running on our network.
Let's go to the last year. I think when I spoke to you, you mentioned listing some of these banks on the stock market. And I heard you talk about, well, if some of the banks cannot meet the minimum capital requirement, why not? Others will come and try and help them, or possibly the central bank would have to take a second look. If they have to help them, government will have to come in. They have to help them make sure that they all stay, in business. What has happened to the issue of talking to them to think of, okay, let's open up and allow other investors to come in by listing on the stock exchange?
Okay. Listing is a very important issue, and because of the community ownership nature of the rural and community banks, you have to do a lot of education and get a good buy-in, because when, let's use Nandom again, most, if not all, the shareholders are from that area. So if you are listed on the stock exchange in Accra, they think people in Accra, even though
Want
they
to own their bank.
want to own their bank, even though there are limitations on how much you can own in a rural bank. But you need to explain to them that when you yourself you want to sell the shares, there should be a market for you. And this is the education we are doing. Some have understood, and some think, oh no, let's keep our bank to ourselves because we are the community and we own it. So we need to appoint consultants or engage consultants to be part of this process, and I believe in the very near future we'll be able to get there.
And that will take a long time with what you're saying. I mean,
it's not something you have to rush, and don't forget you cannot force it on anybody. And again, let's correct this notion that it's only banks that may need capital that should be listed. Listing on the stock exchange is to make your shares tradable.
Tradable, yes.
So
because currently, whoever is holding shares within the community is not tradable.
Exactly.
You can't even go to the bank and say, okay,
can I sell my shares? Because the bank is
like
prohibited from even owning his own shares. So we must go through the education. It may take some time, but we'll get there.
So when it comes to the area of corporate social responsibility, I mean, you as ARB Apex, what have you been doing? Is it that you collaborate with these rural banks to do that? Because we've seen some of the rural banks engaged in helping the communities, building schools and all that. But you as the big boy, the supervisor, what do you also do? What have you been doing in that area?
Good. The ARB Apex Bank to engage in a lot of corporate social responsibility in the area of health, in the area of education and security. The same as the rural and community banks. I know some of the banks have even sponsored medical doctors to finish their courses. I know as we speak, Manya Krobo Rural Bank, they have sponsored 4 students. As we speak, 3 of them have completed. 2 of them are medical doctors at Kolibu, and 1 is in Tamale. We know Upper Manyakro Rural Bank has built 4-bedroom bungalow for the teachers in their catchment area. South Akim, the same education, classrooms for schools in Nankesi. Secretary Rural Bank, they have put up a police station at Mampong. That stretch some time ago.
They didn't have a police station?
No, and it was a hotbed for armed robbers.
Yes.
And they put up a police station there. And since that time, there has been some level of relative peace and calm on the Scarp. And a lot of them, Amenfiman, Zimamanle, Fiasiman, Anglon, supporting education, supporting health, supporting security. The rural and community banks, as we said, we serve the communities in which we are, and we are there for them.
Where do you want to take this bank in the next year? I mean, we're going into 2020. What is the plan? What's the agenda? Beyond all the things you've shared with us, yes, you're looking at that, all the ABCs, but I'm sure that when I get up, what should I measure Kojo Mata with? as far as going into the next year with the ARB Apex Bank, carrying along all the community and rural banks?
Tough question. When we wake up and we open our eyes in 2020, before the end of the year, the rural banks should be doing what every financial institution is doing. We have embarked on the digitalization process, and before the end of 2020, whatever services you can get from a big bank, you should be able to get it from a rural and community bank. Rural banks don't do foreign exchange, so that may be the only thing you may not be able to get. But every service you get from a big bank, a universal bank, you should be able to get it, and even better service from a rural bank. We have introduced our card ATMs, and Apex Bank and the rural and community banks are the first to issue an EMV compliant local card.
I see. A card that allows me to be able to withdraw from Fidelity Bank, that is if they are compliant.
Yes.
Zenith Bank if they are.
Yes.
What do you call it? Republic Bank if they are.
Yes. You know, the universal banks were using Max Stripe cards.
Yes.
Apex was the first to issue EMV compliant cards, and Gibbs was so happy with us. Now the universal banks are now complying. Of course, local card, I'm not talking about Visa.
Yeah, normal,
I'm not talking about
ATM
MasterCard.
cards.
Normal card, local. We were the first to issue it. So we still want to not to be overtaken by the big banks. So we will improve on our services and make sure we give quality service to the niche market that we serve. So they will not want to go to any other place, but they will get the services that they want from us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kujomata.
Thank you
grateful. Okay, so we've been speaking to Mr. Kujomata, who is the managing director for ARB Apex Bank, and I'm sure you've heard it for yourself, and you now understand what the sector is. A robust sector, very resilient, that touches the very heart of our economy. They deal with the people on the ground. Join us again another time where we bring you another intriguing interview on the Joy Business Special with me, Norvan Akwahefort. Thank you for watching.